Bert! Get him! Yeah! Ron Babe was right.
I'm feeling spry. All right, well, I'm recording this on October the 7th, 2024. I have officially been home for, 4 days? Got through the weekend, back on my chore list, getting ready for my trip to South Dakota at the end of the month. I got jury duty summons the week before. So let's pray to God there's nothing on the books that's going to pull me into a jury trial. Let's just hope I have that call-in kind of thing I have to do, like people have done over the years. I did serve on one murder trial case years ago here where I live in Muskegon County. So I'm kind of hoping that opts me out of having to do anything like that again. So if that goes well, I'll be in South Dakota at the White Lake Lodge coming up here at the end of the month with friends, family, patrons, and a whole bunch of people. And we're going to be drinking a whole bunch of Mexican lager from Watermark Brewery. Just in case you're listening, because I know they're going to bring it out there, because they go out there. So anyway, you know the title sponsor of this show. Do I need to tell you the title sponsor? No. You know it's On X Hunt, the title sponsor of every darn thing I do. Every trip, every time I look, when I'm looking for a place to camp in my four-wheel camper, I just pop up the Onyx, find a trail, find a forest trail, find an unimproved road. I probably slept in a few places I haven't normally slept in, but I'll tell you what I did do. Here's what I did do. Oh, I got to make that dog be quiet. So I'm coming back from North Dakota, and I call my buddy Pete Apkowski. Now, you could say Aprilkowski or Appelkowski. It doesn't really matter. Pete is one of the best guys I know in my old world of NAVDA. He's a NAVDA judge, generous guy to a fault. And I called him up, not looking for a place to stay. I was not trying to flop on someone's bed because I got my camper in the back of my truck and my king-size bed. I don't need that. But going through Minnesota, I said, who else would know better than Pete? So I called him up, always answers his phone. And he said, Ron, I'll find something for you. Didn't go exactly like that. First I said, do you know if I can camp on public land here? And he goes, you ain't going to find any around the Twin Cities, so screw that. But I'll get back with you. And he sends me a pin to a place that I could camp all by myself that I'd never been to, but a lot of NAVDA people had been to, called Kelly Farms. But Pete being Pete, he called the guy who's still running it, and It was like pulling in for the night. The only thing I heard was coyotes and hoot owls. Didn't see nothing, didn't hear nothing. And so Pete, shout out to Pete. Thank you, buddy, for finding that spot for me. That was just about, I got there just before sunset. Got the dogs out. Like you said, I've got 1,000 acres to run around on. I didn't need all 1,000, but it was really nice when you're camping on the road and you don't want to have to put the dogs on a leash. You just put their Garmin collars on and you know they're safe, or at least you know you can find them, or you can talk to them, so to speak. You know what I'm talking about. It was fantastic. So big shout out to Pete for that. And that was sent through, of course, an Onyx pin. How else do we communicate in this world? The Gunner Kennel saved 2 parts of the trip. Well, I have a permanent kennel in my truck, and I have a gunner mounted to the top, and I also leave a gunner kennel out in North Dakota with my friends. As it turned out, we needed it. Got that loaded up into a rental vehicle. Long story. You were supposed to hear about that soon. That'll be maybe in a couple weeks that we're going to do the whole recap of that story. But thank God that, just like Garmin around your dog's neck is peace of mind, Gunner Kennels is a peace of mind, even if it means you had to keep one somewhere you only go to once a year, which is what I did. W Supply got the collars. I was in shambles. Like, I looked at my dog's collars. You know, dog collars only last so long. I don't care what you make them out of, the soft stuff, the tough stuff, whatever it is, they get kind of stiff and hard. My dogs all chew on each other's collars, and W sent me a box of collars. Now, that's how they take care of me as a sponsor, but that's also how they take care of you when you need something for a hunting trip. They mailed it out to a friend's house. I got it there when I needed it. I did. Did I tell you last week about I got an old Mossberg 16 gauge from one of my listeners? Did I tell you about that? I'm going to leave your name off of it because you know who you are, and I'm just not sure if that was like someone in your families, your brothers, your dads, but he just said, Ron, you're going to want this. It's like a 1960s back in the day when they made pump guns, it sounded like pump guns. So I got that. I'm going to actually bring that gun to White Lake if I don't have to go to court, or if I don't have a jury trial after my week of jury duty. I'm going to bring that one out. I'm going to christen it on some. I know this gun's been christened on birds before. You can tell it's one of them guns that have personality. Well, I mean, the gun's almost as old as me, so of course it has personality. And I'll be firing Boss 16 gauge number 5s and number 7s through it. Depends on what I'm going to be doing. But Boss supplies the best non-tox ammo to this nation. I don't think they supply it anywhere else. So you actually have to live here. I know a lot of you listen across the pond and in England and Germany and the Netherlands and Australia. And Australia says, hey, hi, Tinny, how you doing? My buddies call me a Tinny. It means I drink too many beers. I think that's what that means. But if you're fortunate enough to live in the United States, you are fortunate enough to be able to buy Boss non-tox copper-plated bismuth shells. It's a game changer. You're also fortunate enough to be able to get Purina Pro Plan. But you can get that probably a lot easier than you can get Boss shot shells, because you can find that at a lot of different places, and you can keep your dog fed on the road. Luckily, I brought an extra bag. Didn't need to, but I had this little plan in my head, like, what if my truck broke down and I needed an extra week there? Oh, darn. I was like crossing my fingers there'd be a warranty problem with my truck. But it didn't happen. So I brought that bag back, and now it's in a Gunner food crate. See how I tied that all in? And it's like an open bag of food that I use to top off, but I don't want to let it get old and air dried and everything. I put it in a Gunner food crate, seal it, lock it, put the pin through it. Even Itty can't get. Itty's one of my idiot Broncos. That's why we call her Itty. Even Itty can't break into that thing. They say a bear can't break into it, but I don't want to find out. I was wearing Marshwear so much, I looked like an ad for Marshwear. And I'm still wearing it. And on top of that, I wish I was recording this a day later. They're sending me a new box of stuff for hunting season. And I don't even know what it is. It's literally a surprise. It's a whole new lineup of Marshwear. So if you have not been paying attention or living under a rock or haven't listened to the podcast because you're only on the road this week, go to Marshwear. You can use the promo code HDP15 and get 15% off your Marshwear order. Or, if you ran out of spices or you're going to process some game, Walton's has everything but the meat. They also have a promo code for you, HDP10, that gets you 10% off of Walton stuff. Now, obviously, it's not the stuff that's on a monthly special or sale if they're running a sale, but you want to restock your kitchen, you want to take it to another level, take it to Walton's, get their catalog, and have fun shopping. Canine Athlete, we use we use both of their products. Not on the dogs. We use the Canine Athlete on the dogs to hydrate and recover, and we use some of the Canine Pro because one of the dogs had, let's just call it I don't know if it was a digestion problem or an evacuation problem, but that seemed to really help putting that Canine Pro on the food. It kind of puts that gut biome back together. That's the best I can describe it to you. But Canine Athlete, they have a promo code, which is, guess what? No, it's not HTP. It's Canine Athlete, and you get 25% off your first purchase. So look at it and check out me, Trent, Heather, all my friends out there, I bring bags of this stuff just for the human side of it, the wilderness athlete side of it. And hydrate and recover and energy and focus. I don't go a day without it. Now, I may exaggerate once in a while on one of these intros, right? But I'm not exaggerating about that. I go through 2 big Yeti mugs a day, 1 hydrate and recover and 1 energy and focus. And I don't go a day without it. I haven't even had a diet. Well, that's a lie. See, now there's where I exaggerate. I used to drink a boatload of Diet Coke. I don't anymore. I get what I need from this. It's better for you. But every once in a while when I'm on the road and I walk into a gas station and I start getting weak because I look at the chips and I get a Diet Coke. But this has replaced my Diet Coke. It really has. Other than that little once in a while. My wife she went out of the way to tell me, she goes, did we get a lot of views on Instagram when we did the Arxis? The Arxis, did you see that on our Instagram page? My wife and I tried to do one of those, like, boom, 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 and then we changed into our boots. Anyway, it was corny. I can't keep time, but she is in love with her chauffeur. I'm going to spell it for you because I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Jodhpur, but it's some name from Sweden. So how the hell the J could be silent. It might be Odö. I don't know what it is. I wear the Primo short when I need a rubber boot just for around the yard, cleaning the chicken pens, taking care of the dog. I'll wear my Primo and she wears her chauffeur. And I tell you what, if you struggle to find a gift for your better half, whatever half that is, I would tell you to go to Arxis USA and find a pair. Because that's something you don't get from somebody very often, right? A pair of boots, but they're so handy. Well, actually, I would tell you that any of the things I'm talking about, from Gunner Kennels to W Supply, I'm sure they have a gift certificate. Garmin, Canine Athlete, Mossberg Shotguns, Boss Shells, Purina Pro Plan, Walton's, Marshwear, Arxis. I mean, they all make great stocking stuffers. In some cases, you better stuff a big stocking. You're not going to fit the four-wheel camper into a stocking. You are not going to fit the four-wheel camper into that at all. That's a go, no-go. But anyway, it was a great week. It is fun to, like I said in the last intro or 2 intros ago, like every company that sponsors this podcast, that brings it to you without a mid-roll or part of the way through commercial, you're all going like, all right, well, we already hit skip, Ron. We don't even know what you're talking about because we hit the skip button. But for those of you who I love and love this show and just love the silliness of some of the episodes and the seriousness of some of the other ones and the informational value of a few of the other ones, you know that these sponsors keep this show and they keep it on the front end. It drives me crazy. Almost every podcast, even some of my friends' podcasts, and I'm not talking about Meat Eater, obviously they went to this a long time ago. Right in the middle of a good conversation pops the commercial, whether it's for something related to hunting or not, and it drives me crazy. So you can thank these sponsors for putting up with this intro, and I can thank you for putting up with this intro. And I can also thank all my Patreon patrons who will get an invite to the Zoom room. It'll be this Thursday. I got a couple new patrons just signed up today. I saw it. I haven't wrote them back. I always write patrons back a little note, see if there's anything they need. But we're going to have a Zoom room this Thursday. We're going to have a recap of North Dakota and probably a good recap report from a lot of my patrons. Several of them were with me in North Dakota, not by plan, not by design. It was fun. It was really fun. And God dang it, is that it? I got court date. I got this. Oh, this episode is about, it's with Danielle Prewett in her new book, Meat Eaters Wild and Whole. And what's kind of cool about the episode is my daughter is a registered dietitian. Like she's not a dietitian. She's not a consultant. She's a registered master degree. She knows what she's talking about. So when those two start talking about food, they must be right. I love it. And it was fun. We did this about 3 months ago before Danielle had her her newborn. So there's a little bit of newborn talk in here, or a little bit of watch what happens, because my daughter already had two, and this was Danielle's first. But it was a fun podcast. I enjoyed it. The book is on its way to me. I haven't seen the book, but it's on its way to me, and it's for sale now. And I don't know where you go except probably themeateater.com. I'm not sure. I'm not. Oh, two other things. No, one other thing. So I'm out in North Dakota, and my wife says, you got a box in the mail. She goes, you want me to open it up? Well, it's kind of a trick question with her. I like to see what I get. I like to know what's in the box, right? And if it's from, let's just say it's from Garmin, I'm like, okay, open it up. It's probably something they sent me, a collar, or something they sent me for a giveaway. If it's a gun or kennel, it's a big box. But just a box, it was an undescribed box, and it was from Montana. And I said, what does it say? She says, MKC. I'm like, MKC. I'm drawing a blank. And then I said, yeah, open it up. And it was from the Montana Knife Company. They sent me a brand new Sharp Tail. Now that is their new, I would call it their official, I'm going to say bird cleaning knife. Certainly would work for ducks. Certainly works for upland. I just wish I would have had it. But what I did is I brought some of my Sharp Tails back, completely frozen and feathered. So I will do an Instagram video. Wait till you see this little knife. Now I will give you a user warning. This thing comes in this great sheath. It comes in a box that looks like you're getting a watch for retirement party with a note from the person who sharpened it, and the person who inspected it, and the person who wanted me to have it. Oh, and thank you to Ben Brannington from Onyx for giving my information to Montana Knife Company. I was pulling this out of the sheath, and I didn't know how much pressure I was going to need, so I was kind of pulling, and I pulled, and I tried to put it back in the sheath because it kind of has like a pop to it, and I stuck that sucker right into my knuckle. And I mean, it didn't even bleed. It went into my first knuckle bone, my index finger knuckle bone. So I'm just getting the feeling back lately, and it's a little tough. I still got like a little electrical charges there. So this thing, I'm gonna open it again right now. See if I'm gun shy handling it, but anyway, it is beautiful. It feels like, compared to like a Bic razor, this feels like one of those old, the kind you shaved with back in the day. It just has a balance. It's got a very long handle, which is very comfortable, and probably about a 2 3/4 to 3 inch. Let me see. I'm a millwright. 1, 2. I'm gonna call it a 3-inch blade, just perfect for skinning birds, skinning our birds. So thank you to the Montana Knife Company. They are not a sponsor, but they are generous as all get out. And look on Instagram coming up. I will thaw out one of those Sharp Tails, and I will show you that knife. All right. God, I can't think of anything else. This was a classic one, huh? 18 minutes. My apologies. Not. I love you guys. I love you girls, and I love you patrons more. All right, everybody, you're in for a treat, and I mean like a culinary treat even here. I have Danielle Prewett, who just came out with a new book, and I also have my daughter, who's in our family, our culinary treat. She's a culinary registered dietitian who follows Danielle. So I thought, I'm going to have Jessi come on, probably for the first time ever since we did our Christmas episode while we were drinking in Florida.
I did come back on once, I think, just so I could tell everybody about the cats that didn't make it because of your dogs. But
yeah, that's
go
right.
back, find that old episode.
But anyway, so Danielle's got a new book coming out here, and I'm going to let her kind of take it from there. Just give us a description of the book, and sarcastically, I'm like, what? Another, I want to say, meat eater cookbook, because obviously you are tied in with meat eater. What's the crux? What's the reason and the desire and everything?
Yeah. So the book is called Wild and Whole: Seasonal Recipes for the Conscious Cook. I started this project like almost by October it'll be like 3.5, 4 years. I can't remember exactly. I was approached to work on this book a few years back, and I wanted to do a book that was a little different than other wild game books on the market, that wasn't just about wild game. I wanted it to be a bigger picture of eating consciously, the way that like we connect to our food and to the landscape, and to have more than just wild game. So this is like the first cookbook that has both wild game and um, side dishes and even desserts in it. So it's more of a well-rounded actual cookbook. So not just how to cook your meat, but what to eat with it.
Right, right. I know. I don't know what year it was, but it seemed to be about 10 years ago, maybe, when I kind of approached food just like I approached a field when I was hunting. Oh, well, there's some tall grass. I'll just go look for a bird in it. And then I learned about pollinators and different berry bushes and like targeting, like, and then my food intake, not by me, but from my daughter or daughters and my wife, kind of followed my hunting interests, right? I was like, I got more interested in like the how and the why, and how come I never do this, and how come I always do that.
Yeah.
And and I'm really glad to hear that, you know, I'm a bird hunter. I don't, in fact, Jessi, when we were getting ready for this interview, she called up my wife, her mom, and she said, "Do we have any venison in the freezer?" And she goes, "No, dad, dad hasn't shot a deer in years." So
It's
You
funny.
never know what could be in the depths of mom's freezer, okay?
that's true. That's true. We have a guilty announcement that sometimes things are freezer burnt in our freezer, but that's not my fault. Uh,
That I've actually just pulled something out of the freezer that's freezer burnt. So
it happens to
the
even,
dogs get a special treat tonight.
yeah, I guess the dogs wouldn't care. Yeah, I had to give some bear meat recently to the dogs because I was like, no, it went too far. But no, I'm really glad that you mixed that in because, I like I said, I wouldn't call myself a purist. I just hunt birds. No
Mhm.
one's going to feed their family, you know, on wild birds, at least not unless you live in central North Dakota and, you could hunt 100 days a year.
We tried. We made actually it's a funny story. So when I started this Wild and Whole, it started as a blog about 10 years ago, and it was really more of an experiment. I I was like in the midst of sounds funny now, but really into yoga, and also just finished Michael Pollan's Omnivore Dilemma, and I wanted to eat more sustainably, and I didn't want to support factory farm meat. So I'm like, how am I going to do this? I was like, well, we hunt. Let's just try this experiment where we can live off the land. That year, we did not shoot a deer, and we literally lived off pheasants, rabbits, and ducks and geese
That's
for a
it.
year for protein. There were a handful of times I broke down and had to buy lunch meat because I was like, I cannot eat another duck this week.
As good as they can be, as good as they can be.
Yeah,
It's
or as bad as they can be. I
yeah,
mean, I
yeah.
experimented with the whole gamut of species on the waterfowl front. So yeah, that's funny. We did eat a lot of birds. We made a little dent in the population of Southwest North Dakota.
That's right. I forgot that is where you're from. Um, so your journey into hunting, was that through your husband, or was that something that you were raised
Yeah,
with too?
well, no, so um yeah, no, I didn't grow up hunting. My dad's from South Dakota, family of farmers. Kind of in Oneida. You know where Oneida is by
Yeah.
Pier. Anyway, so that's where my family's from, and my dad grew up hunting, and so every year we would go visit my grandparents, and the boys would go hunting, and on Thanksgiving we'd have fried pheasant, and that was kind of like a little holiday tradition. But it was really just kind of like the boys did it, and I never questioned it. I was just like, that's what the guys do, and the girls stay in the kitchen. And it wasn't until I met my husband in college. He asked me on our first date to go to the gun range. He was sighting in his rifle for a deer hunt. And then the second date, he had venison backstrap. He wanted to cook for me, and like it was such an endearing thing looking back on it now. At the time, I thought it was kind of weird and odd, but it was so sweet. Like he really celebrated that meat and like made sure I knew that like this is really special that we get to eat this. You can't buy it from a grocery store. I shot this deer. And anyway, it was a sweet date. Even though it was in a college dirty filled house with like no clean utensils to eat on. We were sawing the steak up with his pocket knife. Anyway, so like he kind of introduced me into hunting, and I honestly, I would have to say I would just tag along just for the fun of it. But once we got bird dogs, that's when everything changed. That's when I really got excited about hunting.
Yeah. Jessi has a hunting history. She went with me on one hunting trip when one of her sisters won a Pheasants Forever sponsored small game hunt in Kansas, and Jessi was a videographer.
Yes.
And I don't think have you shot a gun since then?
Only at Targets and stuff, but we were talking about this interview and I was like, maybe it's about time I get my hunter safety license. Maybe it's time for at 34, it's time.
Yeah, it's never too. I mean, you got a gardening license, you got a dietitian's license. You might as well make it whole, Might as well make it wild and whole.
Yeah. But that is, Danielle, I was skimming through the book. I liked your 6 points about like living and eating consciously, because I'm not a hunter. So I'm like, how do I get some venison? How do I start doing some more of this stuff? And you mentioned like CSA, a cultural or community supported agriculture in your book. And I did that this year. So we just got our first basket last week, and I'm like, just so excited to like cook more with like what's just coming in at random. I'm very planned. Yeah. I'm a little more meticulous. I've got 2 kids, so yeah, I think it comes a little bit from that. But
cooking 100 squashes, and you're like, well, great.
yeah. So I was excited just to kind of see the balance of like, it's not all about hunting, it's not all about fishing, it's not all about gardening. You can just do little pieces and parts and really build up. And it kind of sounds like that's how you began in this too, right? Like it was a build up and into where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, who I am today, like the fact that I'm able to live this way, I think it's easy when you look on social media to be like real enamored with it, because people on social want to be like all in starting tomorrow.
Right.
And I really think about the longevity and like what is sustainable for your lifestyle, what's like affordable, like what do you really have time to do? And it really was just doing things little by little here and there, and the next thing I know, I'm like, holy, like it's just a completely different way of life. But yeah,
you didn't think about trying to do Michelin meals or anything like it was just adding one ingredient to something, but probably just still, I don't want to say still going to the store for your vegetables at that point, or were you always?
Yeah, no, I'd love to garden. But I'll be honest, I mean, I'm not a homesteader, I'm not.
You're not milking cows in the morning at 4 o'clock?
No, I did have some chickens. Chickens and bird dogs are tough. Chickens, bird dogs, and HOAs is a triple threat combination there. The chickens don't stand a chance. But yeah, I mean, I'm not a homesteader. I've dabbled in so many things. Like there's a part of me that wants to dive all in and be a homesteader, but again, I'm married. I just can't.
Right.
I just can't.
That's kind of the point. You can only do so much, and your book kind of says, try this or try pairing something. Like it's not just here, like you said, it's not just here. When you shoot a duck, you should do it like this. It's like try this with that, and if you can find this or that, it kind of makes a little bit of an adventure out of putting something together.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So the book is organized by season, and I did it specifically that way because that's how I live my life throughout each season. I get extremely excited to watch the landscape change through the weather changes, whether it's like, the pollinator plants and the flowers blooming and seeing the migration of butterflies, or in the winter, the actual waterfowl migration. Every season has something to offer. And I think there's something about living and staying in tune with that that's very exciting, and being able to connect to your food that way is how I just get to enjoy nature. So I wanted people to open up spring chapter and get really excited about getting outdoors and being like, what's happening in the spring? You've got turkeys, maybe you're a forager, you've got morels or ramps or whatever. Maybe you're a gardener and you're harvesting radishes and snap peas or whatever. Whatever it is, like through each season, there's always something happening at that point of time to get really excited about. And so it is kind of an adventure to be able to think about food in that way.
Yeah, because as hunters, we daydream about, the fall, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's hunting in the spring and there's fishing almost year round, but that fall hunting. But I think of like growing up where I did in Chicago, I would say more, and I'm talking little 40 foot, 40 by 40 backyards and,
Mhm.
houses that were in a row for miles. But even then, and of course, at my age, everybody had some tomatoes or some squash or something in their backyard. I mean, we were as urban as you could get, but we had a rhubarb patch. And when that rhubarb matured, mom would make rhubarb pie. That was only a couple times a year, right? But it was it was like, it's rhubarb. It's not summer. It's rhubarb,
Yeah. Yeah. There's
And I
always
remember
something.
my dad and like most people love like just a tomato sandwich. But you
Yeah.
don't get to do that for I'm going to say a month, right? But I mean, when that tomatoes are perfect, big enough to slice, mayonnaise, white bread, and like there's nothing better. So,
Yeah. You listen, who Guy Clark is?
as a singer, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's got that homegrown tomato song. There's only two things money can't buy: true
Oh,
love and homegrown tomatoes.
I have heard that tagline, or somebody used it on Instagram or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that seasonality of it, I think, is a great angle because I know that's never been, and because I went through the forward of the book and Jessi went into a little bit more detail. I could be completely wrong, but do you tie it into seasons, but not into like 2 pages of how you got that pheasant, or do you throw a couple stories in of how you got the whatever game you shot?
Yeah, I kind of going back to like seasonal recipes for the conscious cook. This book is sort of an invitation for people to eat consciously, and when I say that, to find the stories of where their food comes from. So I felt like as I wrote this book, like I said, it took me a couple years to write it. I spent the whole, like actually like a year and a half going through each season to acquire ingredients, and I wanted these recipes to have a story behind them, whether they're stupid or little or small, or something really meaningful and impactful for how I shot a big game animal or a specific, like a sharp-tailed grouse hunt. So I tried to fit in a story behind the ingredients, and kind of also like how that recipe was developed, sort of like in the behind the scenes way.
Yeah. Jessi, what has that inspired you at all? I mean, I know you did call up mom for venison, which doesn't exist here,
That
but
was actually before this was all scheduled, but yeah, I mean, as I was reading, I was very inspired, but I just appreciate the slow approach because I can also be someone who, once I get excited about something, I kind of want to dive in and I'll burn out
Mhm.
on it too fast. So I always appreciate that approach. And even as a dietitian, the whole seasonality of the way the book is laid out, I really like that because a lot of my clients, they want to eat healthier, they want to do this, they want to do that. And sometimes it just takes like one small focus point of like, let's just focus on what season it is. Let's just focus on like what is in season. Do you know what it means to be in season? Do you go to a farmer's market? Like, So your book has a lot of those just little nuggets of things and habits that people could stack up if they try just one, right? If they just even try going to a farmer's market or trying to grow their own plant or trying to fish or even just reading. You had so many resources on the pages. I was like, I have a lot of research to do.
Yeah, I had the resource section. I really kind of had to tailor it down because there were a lot. But yeah, no, that's a good point. I think a lot of people thinking about seasonality have no idea when things are in season. And I do think, like, while this book tries to capture the essence of foods across the country in each season, I mean, what I'm eating now, like my season is totally different than someone else's season. So it's super hyper regional. But at the same time, I like to think of seasons as changes in a weather pattern and not dates on a calendar. I think this might irritate some avid gardeners, but I think, like, the equinox and solstice, like they're dates on a calendar. They are not the starting and ending points for seasons. Because if you've ever lived in North Dakota or in South Texas, you know that you are in opposite worlds come March.
Right.
Completely opposite. And so while my spring is ending and summer is beginning in March, you're still waiting for winter to end.
You're still waiting for the ice to go off the roads.
Yeah. And so it's not that like we have different seasons. It's just that they happen at different times of the year and they don't happen for as long. Our summer lasts for an eternity.
I'm going to tell somebody, I'm sure people who follow Meat Eater, which is only a couple million people who follow Meat Eater stuff. You did that short film with White Oak Farms in outside of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
That made me, and I'm just telling people to go watch that. You went down there and interviewed them and went through with the herds of cows and the pigs and everything they have going on there. And what was that fella's name? Do you remember, Danielle?
Will Harris.
Yeah, and he'd been on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I think was he on Steve's podcast as well? Did he come on there?
I don't think so.
I wasn't sure if he did or not, but he like if you couldn't like if you had to start eating different and thinking more about your food, and you couldn't hunt, I'd have to move down by White Oak Farms.
Yeah.
The way that guy runs everything, that's like just another layer of like starting to understand like the whole cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's raising cattle like the bison moved on the prairie.
Right.
And it just made me think like, damn, there's got to be some more. I'm sure there's other ones like that. But
there's a great one in North Dakota, Gabe Brown, a regenerative agricultural farm up there. But yeah, I started to get really into that because the more I started hunting, the more I realized how important habitat was and how farmers play a really big role in that. The Farm Bill plays a really big role. And so I started to think about how agriculture and our human consumption of ingredients, really basic things like corn, how is that affecting the birds that I love to hunt so much? And so I really kind of went down the rabbit hole, and that's where I started to get really interested in what Will Harris is doing, is because I know that the way that he is farming is so much more in harmony with the earth and with the species of grasses, and there's more wildlife around that farm because of the way he farms.
Right.
And so that's why not everybody's gonna be able to hunt and fish for all their protein. It's completely unrealistic to think that, and that's not what I want this book to that's not the message I want to convey. But there are other resources of ways of getting meat and produce from people that have the same
the same care that we do as hunters about
Yeah.
prairie or
Coming from a
or
completely different angle, but
right.
we have the same agenda and we have the same goal. And
Right.
so that's kind of what this book talks about a little bit.
Yeah, I was just I loved the way that you felt like you'd have almost swore that he was a hunter, you know,
Hmm.
because if you took a section of land in North Dakota and you depleted it, you're not going to get any food off it. But if you took care of it right, you could shoot. We keep mentioning sharp-tailed grouse because we love them and they're fun to hunt. But you could make that one section of land, and I'm exaggerating, sustainable for X amount of sharp-tails for in perpetuity if you took care of it.
Hmm.
And then kind of like there are a lot of, and you mentioned, alternatives like farmers markets and services that you can get your meat from that it's certainly got to be, I don't know, no one's got a microscope on it, but it's got to be a little bit healthier. Do you notice I know you were gonna, I don't remember the answer, but I know you're gonna cook with some of his products down there. So for someone who's got that kind of, and we all actually have that access, if you can look them up online, I know there's one in Virginia, you talked about one in North Dakota. What did you find when you used that regenerative farm meat? Did you find similarities with the wild?
Really interesting. Yeah, I had eaten venison for so long that when I did that episode was the first time I cooked beef in like no joke, almost 10 years. I was
Oh, wow.
terrified. I was terrified. I was like, I didn't want to do that. I can't believe I'm doing this on
You're
camera.
like, oh no, oh
I'm
no.
feeding this farmer. Yeah. Anyway, and I was really nervous. And I think, a lot of people assume grass-fed finished beef is going to be real lean and just, missing that good fat that a
Yeah.
grain finished cow will have. But I was blown away by not only how much fat was on their meat, like we off camera, we had like a big ribeye steak night,
Mhm.
and it was so well marbled. And the coolest part about it was the fat had a yellow tinge to it. So
Wow.
and Jess can probably speak more on this, but usually when you see fat with that kind of color, it's carotenoids, signifying that that animal has had a varied diet that's more nutritious. And you see it all the time. Like if you hold up a pheasant thigh compared to a chicken thigh,
Yeah.
I mean, the color of the meat is different, specifically from something called myoglobin. The more active an animal
Right.
is,
The
the
more
more
active the muscle.
darker,
Yeah.
yeah, the darker the meat is, but the fat will also change color depending on diet of like insects and other things, or also corn, which is a different subject. But so I was really surprised when I had those ribeyes, like how well marbled they were and how yellow and fat they were, and they were delicious. And the one thing after eating venison for so long, or just even or like pheasant, any kind of wild game, eating chicken, beef, pork, I'm always very disappointed because while I do enjoy eating fat that I can't get out of wild game, the flavor is so bland to me.
Mhm.
But his meat was really full in flavor, and I was blown away. It was
That's
really.
so
I've never heard you talk about yellow or white fats or anything. Is that something? I mean, you got anything you could talk about? Is that a healthier fat, so to speak, or in a dietitian's feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I think like Danielle, I think like you were saying, it's you can see the difference in where how the animal's being raised and what they're being fed. And I mean, you can even think about that with chicken eggs, right? Like so you can see differences like that in your food. I think what it like the first thing that it makes me think of is that I'm always so sad when people assume that like I mean, me, a dietitian or anybody telling somebody like, oh, do this because it's healthier. They only go for like lean chicken breast or like a really really dry piece of pork and they're like eating healthy sucks like it's like but like if you just connect with the food more like you said in your book, if you think about more produce and more plants on your plate, and if you eat food and learn to prepare, it's a whole thing. It doesn't change overnight for people. Their habits don't change overnight, but if people tried that cut of beef, I think the way they would eat almost would change, because you almost appreciate it more, you taste it more if you're more mindful of what you're eating, connecting with it. Like you do eat differently, and then it actually there are some studies that show it can like react differently in your gut, and so it's a whole thing, and it's really cool. You can kind of see, I can see, and I can tell you can see too, like a full circle. It's just where people are in that circle is kind of interesting, and it's like little baby steps.
Yeah.
So can we announce, or should I hit pause, that you're going to have a baby soon?
Oh, we can announce it.
Well, here's something I would and this is from, believe me, my dear wife raised my 3 daughters, right? I was on the road working most of the time. When I was home, I was running Jessi to dance class, or the twins to flag line, whatever it was. I was just a chauffeur, and then I worked on the road. And then I got to start watching my daughters have kids. And now I'm thinking of this, you're going to be having one here really quick, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember Jessi, this is the first time I think Lincoln came over to our house, or I went to their house, their boy, who's 4 now.
Mm-hmm.
And she put all the food on the tray. Like we fed our kids. Like we had a spoon and we put it in her mouth. And I watched this kid just like grabbing food and smearing it in his face. And then what'd you call it? Free. It's like letting the dog have food out all day long. What'd you call it, Jessi? What's it called?
Well, the popular term for it is baby-led weaning, right? It's when you give gosh, I mean, there's a lot of concepts to it, but like it's when you give kids the food, but the whole crux of it is to let them feed themselves, including let them just smear it across their face, let them like shove it up their nose, like let them grab it, let them touch it. And the whole point of it is to also let them stay in touch with their own hunger and fullness cues, because the whole spoon, like eat it doesn't always equate to kid getting to stay connected to their satiation point and what they want to eat and their taste buds and things like that.
Well, I would say there I don't want to admit it, but I'll admit it. There must have been something to it, because I see everybody doing that now. So I'm going to go back and say, are you planning on doing it, Danielle? But the other thing was,
I don't know. I haven't got, I'm just trying to keep him alive to that point. That's all I'm worried about.
you just got to get past the next 5 weeks, right?
Yeah.
I think I see you like pureeing some pheasant for the baby though. Like you can do purees on baby-led weaning. You can do pieces.
Yeah, once he's able to eat solid foods, I'm definitely probably going to lean into eating like organ meats, like that kind of stuff. And definitely, I mean, obviously wild game will be a big part of it, but my biggest fear is having a kid that's a picky eater.
Well,
I'm not making 2 meals. We're
right.
making 1.
And I think all kids will find a time to be picky. But the other thing that Jessi did, I don't know who she followed. I'm assuming it was in a book or a blog. And it was like 100 foods in how much time, Jessi? What was it like?
Oh yeah, 100 foods by 1-year-old. Yeah,
100 different foods, from texture
in the first year.
In the first year, and I thought I thought the free food was like gross, but when I heard that she was getting them turnips and sweet potatoes and chicken
scallops
like,
and
I was like, wow. I know I didn't eat like that when I was little. I had food out of a jar,
Yeah.
And so even though it wasn't all, hunted and foraged, I think Jessi took that approach, was like, I'm going to give you an experience of like what's out there. And it was pretty cool. It was 100 foods in a year, in the first year.
That's pretty cool. I like that idea.
It was fun, and it, especially in an early time when you're in a bit of a fog, it gave me some excitement. I had him at the very beginning of the pandemic, so that was just a whole different time in the world. But I don't know if there's 100% evidence that says that's why he's quote unquote not a picky eater. I think picky eating comes from a lot of behavior, and a lot of parents fear that like, oh, the kid's not eating, so I need to make them something they love, and it can like stumble into picky eating behavior. And it's like, but then you definitely have kids who have sensory issues around food and things like that. But my main advice to parents is to like You set the menu, you choose what to serve, when to serve, where to serve it, and they get to pick if they eat it or not. And if they don't, that's all right. But that's what's on the menu. So it's it's fun.
Decided that I'm not going to give them those plates with little dividers because I
Oh
think
yeah.
I feel like that teaches them to like compartmentalize food. And like when I like to cook, like to think of a plate as being this like holistic meal where everything goes together. Not that you stir it all around, but like
And they will.
but like I don't know. I feel like compartmentalizing it is also like a way to be like, okay, now that's the broccoli over here. That's the, and like be like, well, I just want the sweet potato. Why can't I just eat more of this one? I don't know. Right. I could be totally wrong. I have no idea. But
they serve their purpose. I like both. The rounded wedges or the divided plates, like I love for my daughter Parker because she uses a spoon and it really helps her like push it against something to like get there. So that's why I use it. But yes, you are right though that like you don't want to use them all the time because it can promote like compartmentalizing food. This food doesn't touch this food. So it's like
I never thought about to like actually scoop it up.
Oh yeah, they're so
that's okay.
They're
you
so
don't need to think about that right now.
They're so uncoordinated with their baby spoons. It's ridiculous. I mean, they literally stick themselves in the cheek with it, trying to get it in their mouth. So.
But Danielle, I got to tell you, my kids tonight, I think, are going to have your pan-fried radishes with rosemary. I saw those in your book.
I love those.
It sounded so good. And the CSA right now, I know this is in October, but the CSA I'm in right now is spring, and I got a lot of radishes, and I saw those, and I was like, oh, perfect. I love roasting them. I love cooking them, and I really want to hear about this recipe because I don't understand how you came up with it. But black bean, corn, and tongue empanadas. Just tell me where that came from.
I have not. I don't know. I knew I wanted a recipe.
I got to interrupt. Was there any drinking involved?
Probably. Okay. I drank a lot. I finished the whole recipe development before I ever got pregnant. I'll caveat that. You'll go through this book and like there's a lot of bourbon and whiskey in there.
Like, oh no.
But yeah, no, I'm sure anytime I make a recipe that involves a little time, like the empanadas, I'll be honest, they take some time. Although there's cheats to get around it to make it faster. There's definitely a glass of wine or a ranch water in hand. But yeah, so I wanted a recipe for tongue, but for most people who hunt and they get say like a deer tongue, they're pretty small. And it's like people do all this work to boil it, get the skin off, and then they make lingua tacos, which are great, but like you're getting like a taco. And then on the other hand, what if there's more than one person who wants to eat? Like you want to feed, or what if you are not real sure about eating tongue? Do you really want an entire taco filled with tongue? That's like a lot to eat at one time. Like what if you just want to taste like how? So I wanted to create an appetizer that would stretch the meat, make it go further. You're getting a taste of it, but you're not getting a ton of it. So I always eat this like black bean corn salsa as like a kind of a dip that we make at home. And so I thought, well, why don't I just like chop it up, add it to that, and then add a bunch of cheese to it and then make an empanada. But honestly, I make this recipe and I made it. So I'm doing like postpartum freezer meals. And I was in Montana in the spring and I got a big bison tongue. And so I made the filling for that recipe and then put it in tortillas for quesadillas. So you save a lot of time without having to mess with the dough. So quesadillas are a lot easier way to do that. So that's one thing I'll be eating here in a couple of months is black bean corn and tongue, bison quesadillas.
Okay, but when was the first time you had tongue? Because I'm not ready to eat that yet, but I'm just curious, how did you try tongue for the first time?
I don't know why or how. It was a deer tongue. I think the first tongue I had was from a deer, not a cow, ironically. And it just came from like being curious, when we started like hunting for our protein, it became really important to me to utilize as much of the animal because I didn't want to go to the grocery store. And so all of a sudden I started getting real scrappy with it. And you really learn to appreciate food when you're kind of forced. Not that I like couldn't just go to the store and get meat. I'm not like trying to go hungry here, but you do start to experiment and become more adventurous with what you're eating. And so the tongue was part of it. And so that I just wanted, even if I didn't like it, like I've the kidney, I'll try it, don't like it, not going to save it again. So I don't think you have to eat everything all the time, but that's kind of why I ended up starting eating the tongue is
It sounds like you just got curious, like
curious, hungry.
Yeah. Curious and hungry. I think that sounds like my children. Um, yeah, I like that you had a recipe that uses tongue, which of course is maybe for someone like myself or other people, they'd be like, ooh, I don't know about that one. But you offer a lot of suggestions in the book too, which is nice. And even just some different recipes like the venison pumpkin stew, which people might find like a little more approachable if they're just getting started in this world. And so you have a great mix of those recipes. It sounds like you can tell you worked really hard throughout the years on this book because they're very carefully picked, I feel like.
Yeah, it was hard because I wanted to have I wanted like a lot of people who follow me are pretty avid cooks, and I wanted to give them something to get excited about, like chocolate porcini pot de creme. It's basically like a rich French chocolate pudding, adding porcini mushrooms to it. Like I wanted to give like that audience like something fun. But I also realize most people just need a meal for Tuesday night.
right.
Like just give me something. What am I going to do with all this ground meat I have in the freezer? So I wanted to try to do all the things.
I want to talk a little bit about your hunting prowess. I don't know. I watched you on a couple other episodes, and is your shooting ever going to catch up to your cooking?
No.
Okay. That was a hard no.
No, I mean, I think honestly, it just takes my shooting gets better. Once I came back to Texas from North Dakota, we got a spot not too far from our house, about 15-20 minutes away, where it's just covered up in dove. And man, that's a great way to just dust off the gun and start shooting more. And I
Yeah.
think part of it is also just having fun. I think sometimes when we get, well, maybe for me particularly, because when I started hunting, um, I had only been doing it for a couple years, few years before I joined Meat Eater. And so that pressure of being on social media and being filmed and shooting a gun
Right.
sucked. And it really does mess with your head when you're trying to shoot. And so like being able to just like put it all away and just go out and just like go on just shoot dove that are just zooming by, like that definitely helped my shooting skills.
Well, you've probably seen the episode that Steve filmed down at my house in Virginia when we did the Virginia dove hunt.
I have not.
You have not. Oh my God. I should have made that prerequisite before we got on this interview. It's one of the best Meat Eater episodes ever.
Is it?
Actually,
Dove in Michigan, right?
yeah, we're in Michigan. We can't hunt doves here, but I have a home in Virginia that I used to work for about a decade, and we kept the home and we rent it now or rent it out. But years ago when I was living there, Steve called me up back when they were like, I don't want to say struggling for episodes, but way before Meat Eater, when it was much smaller. Like he would call me up, he says, hey, where can we go? I said, well, you can come down here and dove hunt. Okay, cool. We're going to do an episode on it. But we hunted barn pigeons the day before dove season, and we cleaned those up and plucked those and whole fried them like little baby turkeys. And then I made what everybody makes with dove, a popper, cream cheese, and dove meat. And then we made some other dishes. So, let's talk about Dove a little bit. A gazillion people make poppers out of it, but what would you say, like, what would be your favorite thing to do with Dove? Because I do get a lot of them, and it's something
Mhm.
I can dump on Jessi. So anything in that book or any suggestions for
I actually don't have a Dove recipe in that book.
just eat poppers, don't you? You just eat poppers.
I'm not opposed to eating poppers. When there's other people around, if we're like in a group, everybody else wants poppers. So, I'm whatever. Eat the popper. What I like doing at home is I pluck them because their feathers practically fall off. It didn't take very long to pluck them. And then before I gut it, I just take a pair of scissors and cut out the spine, and then you can just slide the guts out.
Yep.
Spatchcock them open, and I grill them like that. Just sometimes, I mean, honestly, we had so many Dove this year. Like we were just kind of eating it with salt and pepper, just like that on the grill. But like any kind of sugary thing, like I I've got a guy that went to college with us. He makes all this prickly pear stuff, like South Texas prickly pear syrup, simple syrup. It's for cocktails, and I literally just brushed that on the bird and like slapped it on a hot fire because they don't take very long to cook. So you want like really high heat. And so that sugar kind of caramelized. I was really good with it. But really spatchcock and just grilling it like that is kind of my favorite way to cook Dove.
And do you do that mostly with the pheasants and sharptails too? Spatchcock them? I know
No.
that's
Well, I do it with smaller birds.
right.
I like it with quail,
Well, yeah.
um, and partridge.
Okay.
Partridge is kind of like the biggest I get.
Okay. And then everything else you'll part it out?
Yeah. Yeah. Unless I've got, say, I shoot one sharp-tailed grouse,
Mhm.
then I'll do that because I'll just eat the whole bird. But if you get a handful of birds, like with pheasant, I mean, we usually get a pretty good handful between Travis and I. And so I'll break that down and to just pheasant or to just breast meat and just thigh meat to cook separately.
Yeah. Do you save most of the or I know you said you don't like kidneys, and I've never tried to find I don't even know if I could find a kidney on a pheasant, but I love liver and I love heart. And
Yeah.
you save all those bits?
I do. Lately, so we make an annual trip to North Dakota for upland hunting every year, and that's usually when we shoot the most amount of pheasants. And so it depends, like I like the hearts and I'll save a whole bunch of them and skewer them up. But if I have a bunch of pheasant livers, I'll make a pate with them, but it does require a lot of them. And so you kind of have to make sure you're shooting that many birds. But a lot of times I'll give it to the dog. They worked hard for that, and
They,
they could use
they
a
love it.
little,
Oh, they'll eat it. They'll eat
they
the
could
whole
use a little
cart.
extra.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, they will. And I used to be very much against that. Like when I first started, I thought, like, how could you feed this meat to your dog? And then I'm like, my dog's doing way more than I am. Like, how rude am I? um,
Let him
'Cause,
celebrate. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I'll save the hearts and livers and I'll just pan fry it up with eggs. But like if we're going out hunting back to back every single day, like I don't have time to do that. And I need my dog to be healthy. I'm happy to give him hearts and livers these days. And it's not out of disrespect for the animal, but more so respect for my dog.
No, that's I know people that anytime they're I know people who when they clean their deer and they're just getting off some silver skin or getting off little icky
Yeah.
parts or bloody parts. The dog's just sitting there like this. Come on,
Yeah.
bring it here. And they absolutely. I mean, they would love
Dogs
it.
get a lot.
You could do that with dry kibble too, but it just feels better doing it with a little game meat that you shot. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to say keep the silver skin on before I freeze it. And that way if you do get frostbite, you can just skin it off and the meat's usually pretty protected. And so every time I'm like defrosting meat, there's usually something to trim that I give my dogs. And we fish a lot down here on the Gulf Coast. And so we save all the carcasses from the fish and the heads,
Yeah.
and I make fish soup for them because
Nice.
they're older. I don't know. I should probably, they were on glucosamine, but I give them fish jello almost every day. And I'm like, that's gotta be good for them, right?
Well, that's what the mushers do, right? The mushers feed them that. All
Do
right,
they?
I've got a confession to make here. When Jessi inquired about venison, and again, I haven't shot a deer, and I can't even remember the last one I shot. But my neighbor was good enough to get me a doe because his kids wanted to start canning, and I learned to can. That's my favorite venison. Seriously, canned venison, which is
Really?
yeah, you could just use it for any kind of sandwich or taco or anything.
Uh-huh.
I'll just eat it with a fork. In fact, if I open up my
I was gonna say, do you have an old jar? That's gotta be real.
I don't know if I do or not, but this is yeah, this is pickle spice venison. That's
Oh,
so I've got a lot of that, but I don't know if I've got that jar back here or not. See. Yep, here it is. You're gonna love this. The listeners, unless you ever watch this on YouTube, I don't know. Can you make out that date, Danielle?
2013.
Yeah.
December 2013.
This is
Oh no.
10 years and 5 months old. We opened up a can of this when we were canning this in January, and it was still unbelievably good.
Oh my goodness.
And it looks like Alpo dog food. It looks hideous. It looks hideous. Anyway, where I was going with the confession before I got into a rabbit hole, I did save a backstrap. My wife is going to be the person who says, you don't know how to cook wild game. Your son-in-law cooks it perfect, and don't cook it for me. So Jessi, I have a tenderloin, one side tenderloin of white-tailed deer. Danielle, I want you to give her, I'm going to take it out of the freezer when I get back from Pennsylvania. And I want you, what should she do with this? I'm giving it to her kitchen. It's not
Write it down.
Yeah. So what should she do? Get fancy if you want to.
Well, you're gonna eat it in the summer?
Yeah. I mean, probably maybe for 4th of July when we get together or something.
Let's see here.
So
What would I do? You know what I would do? When it's hot outside, you can my favorite way of cooking it is always gonna be in like a skillet. If you want to do it outside over a grill, I still will put it on a cast iron because it gets a better crust that way. Most of the time, I don't get crazy with seasonings or anything. Really good salt and pepper. And but when I mean that, I mean like not the fine iodized salt, like a coarser ground. And then I love a good chimichurri sauce. It's so simple, it's vibrant and acidic, and it's a mix of a bunch of herbs. Usually with parsley. I like to make mine with parsley and cilantro because I'm from Texas and we put cilantro and everything. But it's a bunch of herbs, a little shallot or garlic, and then vinegar and olive oil. So basically like a glorified vinaigrette. And what's great about it is that acidity kind of cuts what some may call the flavor of wild game as gamey, but it also the oil provides the fat that's missing in wild game. So I always try to think about when eating something like the backstrap is just such a lean steak. Yeah. How can you add fat to it without just putting butter on it? And so like a vinaigrette for like the summertime when it's hot is just really refreshing. Kind of makes it just pop.
You marinate it in that or just baste it?
No, I add it on top finish. So in that book, there's a recipe for ribeye with the chimichurri sauce. Okay. And it has radishes actually in it. Radish chimichurri. Which, I mean, you can use the radishes if you want to, or not use the radish. You can use it with or without the radishes. But like it's just such a nice, vibrant sauce to go on top of red meat.
Good deal. Well, it sounds like we're going to be eating wild and whole over here pretty soon.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, Danielle, thanks for coming on. Is there anything else you want? I mean, we couldn't cover all the recipes, obviously, time constraints, but did we miss anything, or do you think we got a good picture of what this book is about?
I think you got a pretty good picture. Yeah. It'll come out October 8th.
Right. And
Yeah.
we'll release this whenever, whenever the powers to be say release it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're recording this in the summer, so I guess when people listen to this, it'll be fall.
It'll be like, wait a minute, didn't they just say,
Yeah.
I'll still save my radishes. I'll wait.
If you're listening in the fall and you want to know what to eat with your steak, there is a recipe with browned butter and sage that I love.
Oh.
I just love it. It's just the epitome of fall. So it's the idea came from just one of my favorite smells in the world that I want to capture in a candle is wild sagebrush.
Yeah.
Just love it. And it's actually a member of the sunflower family. But the garden sage is a fair substitute. So I season steak with the sage and just kind of douse it with some butter that's been browned in the pan, and it's just kind of like I don't know. Maybe I like things because it's nostalgic and it brings me back to like moments and outside. Maybe that's what it is that I love about it, but I think it's just a nice pairing in general.
Well, so that could be made with wild sage.
I've always wondered about that. I've looked into it. It can be toxic in certain amounts. We used to take it. Yeah. So I would not use wild sage. We used to take it and we would use it as a mosquito repellent at the campfire. Because when you burn it, the smell is so medicinal almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the same sage that the natives would use, for.
I was going to say I could bring some sage back from one of my trips, but I don't want to break any state or federal transportation laws. So definitely that'll be for the October. I'm putting you in charge of all these recipes in Danielle's book. So
yeah, I think the Honey Dog podcast is about to turn into a little bit of a cooking show.
It could. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. I used to make I had one recipe. It was pheasant calvados. Calvados or calvados, and a friend of mine made it for me one time, and then when I would bring pheasants home, I would make it for the family, and that was always a hit and involved
apple brandy.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, anyway, I think everybody will enjoy and find a little celebration in there, whether it's their foraging or foraging at a grocery store, right? I mean, you can celebrate the food. I know I am not, no one would call me a cook, but I remember every winter when I would make that pheasant dish and I'd make a mess in the kitchen, and it was pretty, it was deglazing the pan, which I didn't even know what that meant when I was reading the recipe,
now, so you've got some experience behind you.
Yeah. About six times I've made that. I'm just going to put it over to look. This is the beauty part for all my older friends that listen. When you have daughters, it's the best thing in the world because they are way more help than sons are. I'm telling you what. And Jessi is now the official wild game cook, and we'll see if we can turn into a wild game collector at some point.
Nice.
Well, and Danielle, if you need any advice, you can reach out and DM Jessi on Instagram once the baby comes.
Yeah, I might need some help.
Happy to help.
Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to talk to you guys. It's pretty enjoyable.
All right. Take care of them dogs and let us know when you're going to get a new one.
Yeah, I will.
You got a few connections down in Texas, but I probably have a few more.
I bet so. I'll probably reach out to you. You might see me in the field this fall with a baby in a backpack, hopefully.
All right. Sounds good, Danielle.
All right. Thanks.
Yep.
Oh, where did my thing go? I'll have to edit the end of that now. Hold on. Well, we're still being recorded because I can't find my button. Oh, here we go.
Here we
Duh.